with Marco Fazio, who is the founder of LITO Travel. Marco, how you doing today?
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Yeah, my pleasure. So for those that may not know you or your background, do you want to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sounds good. Actually, I kind of worked most of my life in e-commerce for big brands like Adidas and Reebok in the sports side. Solo Brands, one of the first brands aggregator that did an IPO in the e-commerce space last year. And on the side, actually, while I was working full time, I built my own company, my own e-commerce, LITO Travel, which started first as a Kickstarter and then turned into a Shopify store and a real e-commerce business.
Nice. Well, congrats on the acquisition with Lido Travel. Let's start there. So what made you start Lido Travel? What was the idea behind it? Did you have like a light bulb moment?
I think like when it comes to e-commerce, there's two types of founders, right? Those that have an idea and don't know much about e-commerce, and those that know a lot about e-commerce, but not necessarily have a product itself, or they're not designers, but they have the ability to build, right, the infrastructure behind it. I was one of the second type of people because I was working in Adidas. I really could understand a lot from this big brand and how marketing and branding really works at scale, let's say. But I didn't necessarily have, let's say, only one idea. I had multiple ideas. What I did was really to go over a framework. I think it's very important to go over a framework to really, go at speed and make sure you don't get stuck in the decision-making process. But literally I listed a few ideas that I had, looked at the market, looked at Amazon, looked at Kickstarter, other crowdfunding platform, see what was there. And the best idea at the end of the day was the fact that, I was living in a small apartment, had a lot of suitcases. They occupied a lot of space. I didn't like it. So I thought that maybe creating a suitcase that is space saving could make sense. There could be a market for that. And later on, I found out that was the case.
Nice. I love that. So you had, a personal problem firsthand, and then you also had market experience with e-commerce. So when you combine those two, it usually results in a successful business. So that's awesome to hear. So walk me through. So Lido Travel, it's doing great. It's got customers, life's good. What made you decide to list it on Acquirecom?
Right. So actually I started the company more as a side project, right? So I was working full time, and for me, it was about the experience, was about, learning everything about e-commerce, launching a business for the first time. I believe that I will, continue launching businesses for the foreseen future, but it was my first experience. So at the end of the day, I found myself in a position where I had a profitable business. I was doing a lot of work, of course, because I was, running operations, running a full-time job. So having the possibility to, let's say, call it a success story and exit early has been really fantastic for my life. And I tried a few, different routes to do that. But at the end of the day, the successful route was to list on Acquire.com.
Nice. So I'd love to dive into that, as I'm sure you probably guess. All right. So you list on Acquire.com. What happens like within like the first week?
Okay, so I listed on Acquire.com. I got initial interest, let's say, from the mention, because it got mentioned from the newsletter. So let's say a lot of initial interest there, but unfortunately everything died out afterwards because we were going into Q4. So slow down in general in M&A activity, a little bit of, I think, fear of market acquisitions in e-commerce at the time. So basically at the point, I was finding myself at a point where I just couldn't move forward. So at that point, I looked at what were the options, and I saw in the platform that you could hire an advisor. So I literally talked to all of them, see what made most sense, and then hired an advisor to help me out selling the business.
Nice. Who was the advisor, if I can ask?
It was Marty from Westbound Road, which has done an amazing job. So thank you, Marty.
Yeah, Marty's great. That's good to hear. So walk me through, so you're working with an M&A advisor, and Now, so what happens at that point? What was kind of the process that led to a successful acquisition?
Right. So, I mean, when you get listed, you get an initial inflow of leads. And then what you do get is a long tail of people that are specifically searching for, e-commerce, specifically searching for your type of business, which is, of course, a much smaller amount, right? So maybe I would say, 2-3 per week in my case. And overall, it took us around 5 months to sell the company after listing on the platform. But what the advisor Martin team did was to kind of do a weekly outreach to leads, right? So to potential buyers, engage them on a weekly basis. So yeah, more or less like a sales funnel, if you want to call it like that, so that people will be engaged over time, the same people, the same audience, to actually move forward and create an LOI and express the interest. So I think what made the difference in this case was really, a continuous follow-up on the potential pool of buyers, and just being consistent, following up in the platform with every single person that reached out initially with the interest.
Nice. Yeah, that is kind of crucial. And I talked to a lot of founders that don't necessarily understand that in terms of, like, when you're selling a business, you got to really sell it. You got to follow up with every single lead you have. I always recommend, treating each buyer like they are the buyer until they're not. So following up with, weekly updates or product demos or any additional information you can share, just to continue that interest with the buyers is absolutely crucial to sometimes finally getting a deal done. So I'm glad you did that. Can you walk me through? Okay, so how did you find the final buyer? What about them stood out? Was it the offer? Was it you two just got along really well? How did you land on the final buyer that acquired your company?
Right. So, of course, we had quite a few people we talked to. I think overall, maybe we talked with messages, maybe around, something like 80 people in total that kind of were at least interested to see the pitch deck and so on. But overall, we got 2 LOIs. The first one didn't go well. It was actually a little bit tough at the beginning because once you receive an LOI, automatically, if it's your first LOI ever, you think your business is getting sold, but there's a few steps from there. And the second time, like when we got the LOI with the actual buyer, it just felt very good from a personal perspective. The relationship with the buyer, very professional. It was a buyer acquiring a few small businesses, small e-commerce brands that were looking into sustainability and veganism as to add in the portfolio. The suitcase we produce is made of recycled PET plastic. So it was a fit in that sense, in the strategy. They would keep the founder story within the growth of the company, which is something that they really liked. And it just felt right. So at the end of the day, I went for it.
Nice. Yeah, I think, getting along with whoever's buying your business is just absolutely critical in terms of, because when you sell your business, I always say it's not like handing over keys to a car. You're going to have, probably a 3-month transition period or a 6-month transition period where you're going to have to work with that person. So being able to get along with them. And then if they have, items like they're going to keep your, story intact or have a vision for the business, I think that makes, the best acquisition. So that's great to hear. Tell me about due diligence. So you are correct. When you sign an LOI, it is not done by, I always say that's, excuse me. That's like the first inning where, a lot of entrepreneurs think you get an LOI, they celebrate, and it is something to celebrate, but it's really the start of, someone potentially buying your business. LOIs fall through all the time. Tell me about like due diligence, just from like a high level. How did that go? Any bumps in it? Any headaches caused? Any tips for other entrepreneurs going through due diligence?
Yeah, I think like what is important in the due diligence is that, in the entire acquisition process, is that the buyer knows what he's buying in a way, because we got a lot of questions from other potential buyers that they just didn't really fit the how you would do due diligence in the e-commerce space, for example, right? So very specifically into KPIs, in the accounts, loans, and so on. This buyer for us, it was pretty smooth, because at the end of the day, if you know about e-commerce, it's really about, Google Analytics, Shopify account, the Facebook ad account, and then it's very easy to see how well the business is running, right? So we can all write some things in the financials, have certain type of expenses and so on. So having that kind of financial due diligence, which is very important, but it's not the same across the world. There's different jurisdictions, different rules, different tax ruling, and so on. But the good thing about being built on e-commerce is that everybody's using the same platform. So once you hand over, let's say, the reading rights of the accounts, it's pretty easy to verify that you have traffic, that you have sales, that you have good average order value, customer lifetime value, and make your own assumption as a buyer on the actual value of the business. So I would say due diligence has been pretty smooth for us, because we went first of all handing over all the reading access to the buyer for the e-commerce platforms, and then once we made the transaction, we just switched the accesses from reading access to admin access, and that's it.
Oh man, that's as easy as it gets. Due diligence for a lot of other people is a lot more difficult, especially if you're moving software or you have a Stripe account with 10 different products in it, and you got to figure out, which customers to move over. So that sounds like actually handing over keys to a car. Actually, the more that I think about it. In terms of, the experience of the buyer, how do you think that, played a role in due diligence? Because on one hand, I've seen a lot of, first-time buyers and first-time sellers, we'll kind of help guide them through due diligence in terms of, these are the things that you both should be working on and, looking at. And then on the other hand, you have experienced buyers who typically, can close a transaction in, 2 weeks to a month. They just they've been through the process before, and it sounds like your buyer had. Do you think that made due diligence a little bit easier?
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't the first acquisition. I believe in the e-commerce space was, I think maybe the fourth or the fifth acquisition in a relatively short amount of time. So I think that was speeding things up, right? So we closed from LOI to asset purchase agreement in around 2 weeks, which is relatively fast, I would say. The buyer already had like the templates that they used for the previous transaction. So we did make some adjustments in the escrow transaction, in the rights of the assets and so on. But I think if you've already done it, right, it's always easier to do it a second time, whether you're a buyer or you're a founder.
Yeah, I actually typically will advise founders to work with experienced buyers, even if the price is lower, because the chance of the LOI closing is higher, and it'll just make your life a lot easier in terms of, if you're selling a really technical product to a non-technical buyer and they've never gone through an acquisition. So I think another tip for maybe some entrepreneurs listening, if you haven't acquired anything, just buy something for $5,000, go through an LOI, go through the asset purchase, go through due diligence, and that alone will help you when you get to, larger acquisitions. So everything goes a lot more smoothly. All right. So it sounds like due diligence was a breeze. Transition was a breeze. I'm assuming deals closed. Anything else you want to add to it? That was it sounded like a perfect acquisition from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it wasn't also like easy, right? It still took 5 months. So on a weekly basis, we were reaching out to buyers a little bit. Sometimes, we felt that we were getting closer to it, but then not really. I think like it was quite a marathon, but the last part of the marathon went very smoothly. So that's something that I really enjoyed. And to be frank, I wasn't really prepared, because I expected to have more bumps along the way. I think, as you say, like working with buyers that already bought a business, it's preferable also because there's expectation alignments, right? So a new buyer might think that, he buys a business and then, this business is running by its own. What I wanted to make sure of is that the buyer had the capabilities to run an e-commerce business. So to run the operations, to run ads, to run merchandising, because if it's just the first time that you buy a business, you have never heard about e-commerce, have experience from working in e-commerce in corporate as a founder, it's very hard to do that, right? Running a business that is already operating if you've never had experience in the field. So working with experienced buyers definitely was the good call in this case.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I think that's, good advice across all types of businesses. So I guess, that would move into maybe another good question. For other entrepreneurs looking to sell their business, what's maybe, the top 2-3 learnings that you gained through selling your business?
All right. So I think at the end of the day, it's very hard to make valuations on early stage startups. VCs struggle with that. We struggle with that, especially when it's bootstrapped. It's just not very easy. So there are ways to do it, and I think looking at the multiples of previous transactions on Acquire.com was actually a really good way to do that for us. So I would say once you're selling your business, 2 things. First of all, be profitable, especially if you are in the e-commerce space, because it's going to be really hard to convince someone to buy an e-commerce business that is not profitable, just because it's a really margin optimization game at the end of the day. And then, just make sure that you have a clear understanding of your monthly profit and loss account, right? Because first thing buyers want to see, and that's also how your business is valued, is to see how much profit you make on a monthly basis, how much revenue, how much cost you have, and ideally that is consistent, right? So if you have a lot of volatility in the cash flow, that is a little bit less attractive for a buyer, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen the next month. But if you do have that kind of stable cash flow month by month, then it becomes more interesting. So definitely getting the financials right and try to get stability month by month over the cash flow. Of course, ideally towards a growing trend until you get sold.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I think, in terms of, you really hit the nail on the head in terms of just having, clean financials, because that's how a lot of buyers are going to value your business, right off your P&L. So regardless if you're selling a SaaS business or an e-commerce business, for a lot of buyers, it's almost required. Like, they can't really understand the health of your business or make an offer until they have, clean financials. And without them, it does show kind of a lack of preparation, in my opinion, in terms of, you should get these things prepared before you bring your business to market, because it'll just make everyone's lives so much easier. So that's great advice. I guess my final question is, what are you working on now? You mentioned you are probably going to be starting multiple businesses. Have you already started one? Or
yeah, actually today is the day where I just announced my new business, and we are kicking off fundraising for it. So basically, I've launched my company on crowdfunding. My mentor from Lido Travel on Kickstarter has been launching more than 20 products on the market through crowdfunding, and together we just sit down and notice that there's a lot more that we can do in the crowdfunding space and adoption of the crowdfunding methodology to raise money for startups around the world. So what we're doing is basically launching a new crowdfunding platform that will allow to have its own secondary market, where the funds of the startups will be tradable. So more or less like in the stock market, but more for early stage startups.
That's awesome, man. Congrats. What's it called?
Hypeal.
IPO? Nice. I like that name. It seems it makes sense. I mean, you're doing secondary trades on private companies and helping them get financing.
Exactly. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting. There's a lot of challenges that we have to overcome from a technology and legal perspective. But at the end of the day, now it's the time to build something like that, because the technology is already there. There's a lot of ways we can build this in a decentralized way, right? So we, if you think about how big exchanges have been built, decentralized exchanges like Binance and Crypto.com and so on. Why are we using those exchanges only for Web3 companies, right? Not for all startups, for example, and launching securities in that way. So yeah, a lot to come in this space, and I'm sure we'll stay connected on that as well.
That's awesome, man. Well, congrats on the launch, and I'm rooting for you. And if you maybe a few years or a decade down the line, and you IPO or sell IPO, I'd love to have you back on the podcast.
Exactly, sounds good. And Andrew, thank you so much for all you do for entrepreneurs around the world, because I've seen your name many times while I was thinking about selling my business. And again, I think you're allowing people to do something pretty awesome, which is making relatively small transaction if you talk about the acquisition space. But to me, this acquisition has allowed me to start focusing on what I really love, which is entrepreneurship, and not maybe just get stuck with the day-to-day operations of just one company, but being able to move forward and move to something bigger as well. So thank you.
Right on, man. I appreciate that. I'm rooting for you. So if you want to learn more about your story or your new company, where's the best place to find you?
You can just contact me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active, to be honest, there, and we can always have a call anytime.
Cool. I'll put that in the show notes. And Marco, congrats again on the acquisition and the new company. And again, I'm rooting for you, man.
Thank you, Andrew.
Cheers.